Have you ever listened to Vince Gill's music? Type 1 for yes, 0 if you're just discovering him now. Vince Gill used to have it all. But now, at 67, this man who had everything is watching it slip away. What's really going on with the country legend? Is he okay? Or is he quietly facing something far more serious than anyone imagined? This story may surprise you and break your heart. Journey to music. Vince Gill was born on April 12, 1957 in Norman, Oklahoma, into a family where law and music intersected in the most unusual way. His father, a federal judge, could play the banjo, guitar, and harmonica like a seasoned bluegrass player. Judge Gill would sometimes return home after courtroom sessions and start late-night jam sessions with his wife Jareen, who also played harmonica. Vince would lie in bed listening to their music creep down the corridor. Neighbors still remember about the summer nights when guitars and harmonicas rang out in the streets. This unusual combination of trial gravity and porch-picking delight left a lasting impression on Vince's spirit. However, growing up wasn't simple. Vincent was born with crossed eyes. It was not a trivial issue. It required 2 excruciating procedures. Even after that, his left eye questioned if he was weary or upset. He subsequently revealed that he began wearing spectacles not just to improve his vision, but also to conceal the eye that made him feel shattered. As a child, his classmates ridiculed him so badly that he began avoiding people completely. Instead, he stayed at home with his guitar. He was not fleeing from the world. He was building a new one. When Vince was 10, tragedy struck hard. His half-brother Bob was involved in a tragic vehicle accident on a wet highway near Oklahoma City. Bob, formerly a great student and potential athlete, suffered significant brain injury and was unable to recall people's names. For more than 25 years, Bob required full-time care. Judge Gill had to take on more legal work to cover it all. Vince witnessed his parents' marriage crumble under hardship. Bob eventually died in 1993 of a heart attack induced by his injuries. Vince's anguish never subsided. Years later, he stated that such experiences showed him what it meant to truly lose something. That grief seeped into his songs, the ones that make people cry silently in their automobiles. At the age of 5, Vince took up his grandmother's old acoustic guitar and began attempting to play Old Shep. In 30 minutes, without a single instruction, he learned the chords and began singing. His grandmother was astonished and contacted Vince's dad to inform them she had witnessed something unusual. By the time Vince reached 10, his family had saved enough money to purchase him a Gibson ES-335 electric guitar. That instrument cost roughly $800 in 1967, which is equivalent to approximately $6,500 now. And it was more than simply a present. It was a proclamation. Vince wasn't just any youngster with a pastime. He was a musician. Music became his escape. When things were tough at home, Vince did not lash out. He withdrew into his guitar. He spent 6 to 8 hours each day playing, generally alone, in the basement. Friends and relatives reported hearing sorrowful, dramatic music reverberating through the walls. Vince's music instructor subsequently stated that he played with a deep, sorrowful tone that was way beyond his years. He did not talk about pain. Instead, he converted it into a tune. By high school, Vince had formed a bluegrass band called Mountain Smoke. On March 4, 1976, something bizarre occurred. They performed as the opening act for Kiss. Yes, Kiss, the makeup-clad rock monsters. The event took place at the Oklahoma City Fairgrounds, and the audience had no idea what to expect from a group of kids performing bluegrass. They wanted fire and leather. Instead, they received fiddles and banjos. The audience booed. They tossed cups. Somebody even tossed shoes. Vince snapped. He flipped off the audience, mooned them, and walked off stage. It was raw, humiliating, and memorable. Following the mayhem, the band disbanded. But Vince refused to give up. He relocated to Kentucky and joined the Bluegrass Alliance. By 1907, he was a member of the band Boone Creek, which included a teenage Ricky Skaggs. The two of them energized the bluegrass scene. Even though the group was short-lived, their approach contributed to the development of a new sound by combining old-school bluegrass with a contemporary edge. The band's only album, produced in 1977, is now a cult classic. People still talk about it as if they found buried riches. Later that year, Vince packed up again and headed west. He arrived in Los Angeles and joined Sundance, a band fronted by violin great Byron Berlin. Berlin was not a joke. He has performed with Bill Monroe and the Flying Burrito Brothers. He anticipated perfection. Vince learned quickly. They performed at the Palomino Club, one of Los Angeles' most renowned venues, with superstars such as Emmylou Harris and Linda Ronstadt. Journey with Pure Prairie League. Less than a year after being booed off stage, Vince was performing with Grammy-winning artists. That type of comeback requires enormous courage. Pure Prairie League was on the verge of collapse in September 1978. Their lead vocalist Larry Ghosthorn has recently departed with his brother to form a new band. The group, which now consisted of no founding members, was anxious to survive. They started conducting auditions, trying to find someone who could keep the music going. That's when Vince Gill, a young bluegrass artist, came back into their lives. Gill had previously opened for Pure Prairie League in Oklahoma City with his band Mountain Smoke 2 years prior in 1976. They quickly spotted him. He was only 19, yet his skill jumped out. They offered him a place back then, but he declined. Bluegrass was still his passion. In 1978, he was in Los Angeles performing with Byron Berlin and Sundance. He performed with Pure Prairie League one more time. Within hours, they had offered him the position. This time, he answered yes. Jeff Redifer, the band's soundman, recalls it vividly. We'd seen him perform in 1976, but he was dedicated to bluegrass. When he returned in 1978, we knew he was the one. Vince Gill took over as the new frontman. He wasn't only singing. He was playing guitar, mandolin, and fiddle, or anything with strings. At 21, he was moving into a greater limelight than ever before. By 1979, the band was in Miami recording their second album, Can't Hold Back, at Criteria Studios. It would be their 6th studio album, but the first featuring Gill on full-time basis. His presence altered everything. His voice imparted a rich emotive quality. He also began creating songs combining rural charm with pop melody. Michael Riley, the band's longest member, stated it best. He was a breath of fresh air. The record wasn't a tremendous success, but it gave the band fresh life. And for Vince, it was the start of something much larger. Then came 1980. That's when everything detonated. The band released Firin' Up, which had their biggest hit ever, Let Me Love You Tonight. The song climbed to number 10 on the Billboard Hot 100. Gill sung lead, and his voice carried the entire song. They even enlisted jazz superstar David Sanborn to play sax. It was smooth, catchy, and refreshing. Vince did not stop there. He penned I'm Almost Ready and 5 more songs for the same CD. She's All Mine, You're My True Love, Lifetime of Night I'll Be Damned, Janie Lou. The sound had altered. It was now softer, more polished, and leaned toward country pop. Vince Gill was the driving force behind this transformation. However, excellent runs do not always endure. They came out with Something in the Night in 1981. It had a little success, Still Right Here in My Heart. But the album did not connect like the previous one. Then, catastrophe struck behind the scenes. Their label Casablanca Records declared bankruptcy and was sold to Polygram. The new owners removed the majority of the roster, including Pure Prairie League. With no label and low sales, the band was stranded. Vince Gill and guitarist Jeff Wilson departed in early 1982. Gill had already gained popularity as a solo musician, and he quickly signed with RCA Records. Pure Prairie League replaced him with Gary Burr, but the magic had vanished. Momentum was lost. Vince's time with the band was over, but his solo career had just begun. During this same time period, another event occurred that would permanently change his life. Vince met Janice Oliver while pursuing his musical career in California. She was a member of the country duo Sweethearts of the Rodeo. They began as pals in the music scene, but things rapidly became serious. In 1980, they married. 2 years later, on May 5, 1982, their daughter Jennifer Jareen Gill was born. Early career. In 1982, Vince Gill believed he was on the edge of something spectacular. His song, Let Me Love You Tonight, had gained recognition, and he believed his solo career was ready to take off. So, when Rodney Crowell approached him to join his band, the Cherry Bombs Gill declined. He wanted to succeed on his own. But the music industry can be brutal. His progress slowed during the course of the year. His songs did not chart. Gigs have dried up. Confidence changed to doubt. By the end of the year, Gill was suffering. So, early in 1983, he phoned Crowell again and accepted the offer. Joining the Cherry Bombs proved to be the smartest decision he could have made. This wasn't simply a support band. It was a formidable lineup of musicians, including Tony Brown and Emory Gordy Jr., who would eventually establish the sound of country music. The band was continuously on the road, doing close to 200 gigs each year. It was tiring, but educational. Gill polished his guitar talents, developed his stage appearance, and built contacts that would benefit him for the rest of his life. He learned how to thrive in the industry by focusing on the long game rather than seeking stardom. That same year, Vince took a brave decision. He packed his belongings in Los Angeles and relocated to Nashville with his wife Janice and their little daughter Jennifer. It was not glamorous. Money was scarce. They lived in a little rented home, and Vince worked every job he could get. One of those gigs was playing guitar for Roseanne Cash, who was married to Crowell at the time. That trip of 1983 became his classroom. Cash's band was tight, professional, and demanding. Vince had to grow up quickly, both on stage and at home. Balancing parenting with late-night rehearsals and unpredictable salaries was difficult, but those months in Nashville made him stronger, smarter, and more focused. Meanwhile, his former Cherry Bombs bandmate Tony Brown was rising through the ranks in Nashville. By 1984, Brown had been promoted to RCA Records' chief of A&R. He didn't forget about Vince. He knew Gill had something exceptional, so he began working hard behind the scenes. Brown submitted Vince's tapes to RCA's Joe Galante, requesting every favor he could. His efforts proved successful. In early 1984, Gill signed a solo deal with RCA. It wasn't only about talent. It was about trust. Brown knew Gill could produce, so he went out to prove it. Vince took full advantage of the opportunity. During the month of February in 1984, he released his debut solo album, which was a 6-song EP titled Turn Me Loose. On the list of the top 40 songs, 3 of them were included. The number 34 spot was obtained by the victim of life's circumstances. Although it was not a huge success, it was successful enough to attract people's notice. In Nashville's Woodland Studios, Gill spent a significant amount of time recording with some of the best session players. His preference was not for filler music. Each and every second was important to him. This commitment was noticeable. Gill's Extended Play EP demonstrated that he was not merely another optimistic voice in the country music genre. He was a genuine artist who was prepared to perform on larger venues. Things continued to improve during the same year. It was on April 10, 1984, when Gill was honored with the title of Top New Male Vocalist by the Academy of Country Music. This was his very first major prize, and for a little moment it appeared as though everything was finally coming together in the right way. However, celebrities did not emerge out of nowhere. The Things That Matter. His subsequent album was released in 1980. Though it was good, it did not succeed in breaking through. Not a single one of his singles made it into the top 10 during the years 1984 and 1988. Gill persisted in his efforts and continued to make progress, but the spotlight remained just out of grasp. In spite of this, the ACM Award served as a reminder. In addition to his voice and skill, the business was keeping a close eye on him. Vince Gill was 32 years old and very close to being forgotten by the time the year 1989 rolled around. Unfortunately, his albums had not been successful and RCA was at a loss for what to do with him. Tony Brown, however, was not yet finished. Brown, who was now employed by MCA Records, made yet another audacious proposition. He persuaded the label to recruit Gill to their roster. He was taking a chance. Brown thought that Gill's finest work was still to come, despite the fact that most record labels were committed to younger performers. He provided him with a new vibe, songs that were more powerful, and a group of people that understood him. It was more than simply a new contract when I signed with MCA. In other words, it was a renewal. That opportunity paid off in a hurry. The album, When I Call Your Name, was published by Gill in October of 1989. Absolutely nothing else on the radio could compare to that. Bluegrass, pop rock, and even country music were all included on the record. The trend was not followed by it. That was its own doing. There was a sense of tradition brought about by songs such as Oklahoma Swing with Reba McEntire. Others, such as Never Knew Lonely, relied on a more subdued and sentimental tone in their music. The title tune, on the other hand, was the most memorable music. Gill's voice was so beautiful, so hurting, and so memorable that it sliced through like glass. The variety of styles was praised by the critics. It became so popular that fans couldn't stop playing it, and Nashville began to pay attention to it once more. There was more to When I Call Your Name than merely receiving airplay. It was a seminal event. On the Billboard country chart, the track reached the number 2 spot after its ascent. In an instant, Vince Gill was no longer only a well-respected musician. His music was a hitmaker. The song was awarded the Single of the Year award at the 1990 Country Music Association Awards. 1 year later, it was awarded to Gill as the Best Male Country Vocal Performance Grammy, which was his first Grammy. It turned out that the song that was almost not published ended up being the one that changed his life. All of the elements, including the vocals, the melody, and the production, came together at precisely the perfect moment. Gill had arrived. In 1992, the album went platinum. The number of copies sold exceeded 1 million. This type of success was quite uncommon, particularly for an artist who was above the age of 30 and had not yet achieved a massive hit. Platinum accreditation was more than simply a numerical designation. It served as confirmation. It was impossible for radio to get enough of his songs. Promoters of concerts were waiting in line to book him. Suddenly, the individual who had previously been unable to secure a performance had become one of the most popular artists in the country music industry. Because of the record, he was able to rescue his career. Yes, I rewrote it. Additionally, despite all of his popularity, Gill did not isolate himself from other people. His rise to prominence as a session player in Nashville was remarkable. In addition to his guitar playing, big stars wanted him to be a part of their recording sessions because of his harmonies and vibe. In addition to contributing vocals and guitar to Reba's Sweet 16 CD, he collaborated with her once more. On the song Bluebird by Emmylou Harris, he sang. Interiors, an album released by Rosanne Cash in 1990, was influenced by him. It was a remarkable turn of events that Bonnie Raitt included him on her album Luck of the Draw, which was released in 1991. Without skipping a beat, Gill was able to successfully go from country to rock to blues. It was impossible to miss Vince Gill between the years 1992 and 1994, as well as award events and stadia that are completely sold out. During that era, his voice served as the unifying theme. In only those 2 years, he managed to deliver 4 consecutive hits that reached number 1. After that, in 1992, I Still Believe in You was released. Therefore, Make Sure That Our Love Does Not Begin to Go Away. In 1993, also known as One More Last Chance. Also, in 1994, the album Trying to Get Over You was released. The reason why each song reached the top of the Billboard Hot Country charts was not down to chance. Rather, it was because Gill had discovered the ideal combination of traditional country heart and contemporary country polish. Even now, I have faith in not only did you hit the top of the charts, it remained there for 20 weeks, occupying a spot in the top 10. When it came to country music, that was a move of power. It was the time when Gill went from being a respected musician to an unstoppable star as a result of his success. It wasn't until the decade came to a conclusion that things started to change. In the year 1998, he published an album called The Key, which came out with a distinctive sound since it was distinctive. It was about the dissolution of his marriage to Janice Oliver, which had lasted for 17 years, and each tune was filled with unfiltered honesty. Songs such as The Key to Life and Kindly Keep It Country took away the illusion of perfection and revealed a man who was coping with the effects of change and loss. The record received appreciation from every single person. Critics referred to it as his most daring work to date. Even if it did not meet the sales of his prior records, it was not necessary for it to do so. It wasn't simply another hit. The Key was a hit. A turning point, the end of his most significant chapter and the beginning of something more personal were all brought about by this event. However, the private life of Gill was not the only thing that influenced his music. The news made headlines about it. Personal life. He tied the knot with Amy Grant, the reigning queen of Christian pop, in the year 2000. During that time period, she had already won 6 Grammys and had sold more than 30 million records. The fans of both celebrities were taken aback. In the year 1998, Gill had just completed the last stages of his divorce. It was in 1999 when Grant filed for divorce from her husband, Gary Chapman. His eyebrows were raised by the time frame. During the time when they were still married to other people, the two had first met in 1993, and ever since then, stories of chemistry had been circulating around them. The moment they eventually made their relationship public, it sent shockwaves across the Christian music community as well as the country music world. For a few of the fans, it was more than just rumors. The act was a betrayal. This was very difficult for Grant's support base to deal with. For decades, she had been the embodiment of music that was founded on a strong religious conviction. Her music was played in many places, including churches and youth organizations. But she was more than simply a vocalist. She was a symbol of spirituality. As a result, many of her Christian supporters turned against her once they learned about her divorce and subsequent marriages. The music she had been playing was even stopped by some radio stations. Others expressed that they had the sensation that they were mourning for her own soul. One other thing was brought to light by the response, and that was how flimsy the pedestal can be when a religious person tries to reveal their humanity. The year 2013 then brought the past rushing back to life. The Kaufman Center in Kansas City was going to be the venue for Vince Gill's anticipated performance. The Westboro Baptist Church was represented by a group of protesters who were positioned outside the venue. Their communications were unambiguous. God despises adultery, and Vince Gill had taken the wife of another man. It was not simply a simple picketing job. It had been years since the event, yet they were still assaulting his marriage to Grant. The majority of famous people would have shrugged them off. Neither did Gill. On the contrary, he took a direct approach to them. Face to face, he engaged the demonstrators in a manner that was calm but direct. A member of the group yelled out, "What are you doing with the wife of another man here? You are aware that adultery is comparable to divorce plus remarriage. Am I right?" Gill did not show any signs of flinching. In response, Jesus also spoke extensively on grace and forgiveness. He said a lot of things. "There is none of that going on with you folks." The scene was captured on tape, and almost immediately after it was uploaded, it went viral. His supporters lauded his bravery. The manner in which he dealt with hatred with honesty and dignity was praised by others, struggles and health challenges. Additionally, in the year 2020, Vince Gill and his wife Amy Grant went to a visit with a cardiologist. Both of them were marked for additional testing, which was a remarkable turn of events considering that it was supposed to be a normal appointment for her. At that time, Gill was informed that he was suffering from a rare cardiac ailment known as PAVRER, which I created as my daughter as the that and identified for Biết ai hãy phá anh bởi đã gì đấy là gì thì đó Fewer than 1% of individuals have it, and of those who do, many are unaware of it. In his situation, some veins in his lungs were directing oxygen-rich blood to the incorrect side of the heart, which caused the heart to work harder for decades without his being aware of it. In spite of the fact that it had the potential to cause abrupt cardiac failure, he had managed to live through it all this time. After only a few weeks, life dealt another blow to the face. Both Gill and Amy required open-heart surgery in close proximity to one another. At first Amy entered, and then shortly after that Gill did the same, during the height of the epidemic when hospitals were refusing to let guests in this unexpected event took place. Consequently, rather of being there for one another, they were trying to recuperate on their own. Afterwards, Gill remarked that those were some of the most lonely days of his whole life. On the other hand, he reported that the brief moment when he was granted permission to visit Amy was like a weight being lifted off his shoulders. They persevered through a year that was filled with suffering surgical procedures and quiet as a unit. 22 years later, in 2022, another catastrophe occurred. Scams and financial loss. When Amy was riding her bicycle in Nashville, she was close to a golf course when she lost control of the vehicle and crashed. 10 minutes passed, during which she was rendered unconscious. Upon the arrival of assistance, she had already sustained severe brain damage. She was severely affected by memory loss, and shortly after, the physicians discovered a developing cyst in her throat. The condition was so severe that she required 5 hours of surgery to get it removed. She was unable to sing in the same manner that she had in the past. Even when she wasn't intoxicated, she joked that she felt like she was drunk because she had problems walking straight. However, Amy, who is known for her unwavering resilience, continued to go on, referring to herself as an old automobile that had been dented and repainted. Vince, on the other hand, never left her side. At the beginning of the year 2023, Gill resigned from 3 major performances, not because he desired to take a break, but because Amy required his presence. It was not an easy process for her to recuperate from the bike accident and the throat surgery. According to Vince, it seemed as though they were just unable to get a break, as one catastrophe followed another. In spite of this, he remained by her side, assisted her in getting through the most difficult days, and prioritized her recovery. The fans lauded him, describing his actions as true love in action. Nevertheless, even apart from all of this, Gill struggled with his own health issues. Polyps formed on his vocal cords, which made singing a terrible experience for him. Just so he could continue doing what he loved, he went through therapy and had surgery. After that, he began experiencing persistent back discomfort, which compelled him to undergo physical therapy and make adjustments to his diet in order to survive each day. Because of the aggravation caused by arthritis, he finally had to reduce the amount of touring he did. He did not, however, stop. He made adjustments, found methods to work around it, and discovered means to continue. And then, something that nobody had anticipated occurred. Late in the year 2022, a woman called Joyce, who was 75 years old at the time, placed a message on Vince Gill's Instagram account. She was only a fan who wished for him to visit Boston. What transpired after that was a nightmare. Scammers who gave the impression that they were Gill had a private contact with her. With the help of Telegram, they were able to convince her that they were in love with one another. She transferred her life savings, which amounted to about $450,000 over the course of nearly a year. They informed her that Gill was going through a divorce, that Amy had blocked his assets, and that he needed money to take care of an assault charge that had been filed against him. Every time she showed hesitation, they increased their pressure. In fact, she was under the impression that they were married and intended to relocate to be with him. Joyce's daughter made an effort to interrupt it. Social workers in the same way. On the other hand, the con artists had totally failed her. Because of her advanced stage and memory problems, her mind was unable to comprehend the reality of the situation. When the truth was finally revealed, the money had already been spent, and Joyce was left in a state of both financial and emotional devastation. After a long wait, Vince Gill's squad became involved. They issued a public warning stating that anyone who claimed to be Vince Gill online was not in any way who they represented themselves to be. The management of his accounts was handled by experts. He would never direct a private message to his admirers. However, the harm had already been done by that point. In addition to Joyce's instance, there were others. Simply put, it was one of the most devastating experiences. In May of 2025, Vince experienced yet another health concern. It turned out to be kidney stones this time, and the agony was severe enough to take him to the hospital. He was forced to call off performances in Birmingham and St. Louis. Fans were informed by his daughter Jenny that he was making progress in his recovery. However, it was a scare. There was a need for Gill, who is known for always turning up to take a step back. And the crowd appreciated it. They reminded everyone that behind the stardom was a man who had gone through more than most people had ever experienced by flooding social media with prayers and messages. Nevertheless, Vince was not slowing down in spite of all of these obstacles against him. In May of 2025, he began a large summer tour, which was his most extensive tour in recent years. It was not a typical tour at all. Since he left Oklahoma in 1975 to pursue his aspirations, this event signified the passage of 50 years. A total of 30 towns would be visited throughout the tour, culminating in 4 emotionally charged nights at the Auditorium in Nashville, a venue that Gill holds in high regard. More than 100 times he has performed there. On the other hand, this solitary residence signified something not the same. A victory lap was being taken. By the year 2025, Vince Gill has advanced his career beyond that of a country music superstar. Despite the fact that he had endured fads, endured major sickness, and supported his wife through the most difficult times of her life, he nevertheless returned to the stage with his heart wide open. All of his gigs were sold out, and his voice, which had been mended and preserved, remained as soulful as it had been before. He did not come by himself either. Gill put up an 8-piece band for this tour, which featured some of Nashville's most talented musicians. There was a whole roster of luminaries who had worked with some of the most well-known names in the industry, including Jim Moose Brown on piano, Wendy Moten, with vocals that could shake the walls, Tom Bukovic on guitar, and a full lineup of other musicians. It wasn't just a matter of background performance here. It was a family affair. Indeed, there was genuine connection on stage. To the same extent that Gill had boosted everyone around him over the course of the preceding 5 years, they joked with each other, exchanged solos, and lifted each other up. So, tell us, what's your favorite Vince Gill song, and why does it mean so much to you? We'd love to read your memories in the comments below. If this story moved, you give this video a like. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel, where we honor the artists who shaped our lives with truth, care, and storytelling from the heart. Thank you for watching.